And I want to wish everyone a Hanukkah Sameach, and for taking the time to study and to enter into the holiday of Hanukkah with Torah. As we know, one of the core values of Hanukkah is not simply a celebration of a single miracle, but rather an appreciation for the continuity of our tradition in the face of opposition, in the face of cultural pressures that would cause our Torah to disappear, to be pushed aside for other values. And really the Hanukkah is the holiday in which we celebrate the continuity of the Torah. As we're aware, on Hanukkah there's no specific mitzvah to eat food. Now there are many beautiful customs to have special foods like latkes and jelly donuts and so on. But as opposed to Purim, on Hanukkah the celebration really focuses on the spiritual side of salvation. And on Purim our bodies were saved, therefore we celebrate with our bodies by having meals, by having drink, and having a wonderful Sudat Purim. On Hanukkah our celebration is more of a spiritual type, and as a result there's no obligation to eat. Rather there's an obligation to be mishabeach, to praise, to think, to be able to sing the songs of Hallel, to reflect upon our Torah. That is the celebration of Hanukkah. And by gathering here this morning to look at the laws of Hanukkah, to look at the values of Hanukkah, we are indicating something about how we will experience Hanukkah this year. And so really kol hakavod to you for coming out and participating in this chance to study Torah together. Now I want to ask a question. If you look at all the holidays of the year, every holiday has one reason that holiday is celebrated. Why do we celebrate Purim? It's very simple. Because Haman tried to kill us, God saved us, and as they say, let's eat. Right? When it comes to Pesach, why do we celebrate Pesach? It's very simple. The Jews were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God took us out with an outstretched arm and with great wonders. Very simple. One simple reason. Why do we celebrate Shavuot? Because God told us to celebrate Shavuot. And of course because the Torah was given on that time. Zman Matan Torateinu. One reason. Not very complex. But when you look at Hanukkah, there are two reasons that we celebrate Hanukkah. What are the two reasons? Yes?
God saving us from the oppression of the Greek culture.
Because God was able to save us from the Greeks. The Greeks took over our country, and we were subjugated to their rule. And God, through the hands of the Chashmonaim, redeemed us, and we were saved politically. We gained our independence. That's one reason. What's the second reason? The miracle of the oil, absolutely. Two reasons. And so my question for you is, Ma nishtana? Why all of a sudden do we have a holiday with two reasons and not with one reason? So I want to begin by looking at the first source, which is the Gemara in the Masechet Shabbat, my Hanukkah. Just as an aside, Hanukkah does not appear in the Mishnah at all, except for one place, in a very odd location, in Baba Kama. There's no Masechet Hanukkah. There's Masechet Megillah that talks about Purim, and there's a whole tractate relating to those laws, but there's nothing in the Mishnah. And all the laws of Hanukkah appear in the Gemara, in the Talmud, which was written 400 years after the close of the Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat. And so the law begins, or the discussion of Hanukkah begins, my Hanukkah. What was Hanukkah? Now you cannot imagine saying something, my Pesach. That'd be very odd. My Sukkos. You don't have that. But my Hanukkah you have, which is that there seems to have been some question about what made Hanukkah so special. What was Hanukkah that was worthy of this attention? My Hanukkah. It comes up in the parak Babem Adlikin, the chapter that we read on Friday nights between Mincha and Mariv, according to the Minhag of Ashkenaz. It's on in that section that it appears because the Talmud discusses the difference between the Hanukkah candles and Shabbat candles. So that's why it's here. My Hanukkah, what was Hanukkah? The Tana Rabbanim, because our rabbis teach. B'chafei b'Kislev, on the 25th of the month of Kislev. For those who are coming a little bit late, I have additional source sheets over here, so please take some source sheets and pass those around for those who come in a little bit late. My Hanukkah. So what was Hanukkah? The rabbis teach b'chafei b'Kislev, on the 25th of the month of Kislev, Yomei Hanukkah. Timnaya Inun. The days of Hanukkah take place, and there are 8 of them. There are 8 days. Delo lemisped behon, that we do not lament, we do not deliver lamentations for the dead. Udelo lihisanos pahon, and during which we do not fast. And so this was one of those holidays that we observe not with big celebrations, but rather with not doing certain things. There are different levels of Jewish holidays. Certain Jewish holidays you don't work. This is not one of those holidays. Rather, this is a holiday that's denoted by the fact that your joy does not allow you to lament and does not allow you to fast. Why? Why don't we do fasting or lamentations at this time? Because when the Greeks entered into the Beit Midrash, they rendered impure all of the oils that were in the sanctuary, that were in the Beit Midrash. And it was when the kingdom of the Hasmoneans defeated the Greeks, Badku, they checked all over and they only found a single flask of oil, Shayamunach b'chosamo shel Kohen Gadol, that had retained the seal of the high priest. And there was only sufficient oil there to last for a single night. Nasabones, a miracle took place. And it lasted for a full 8 days. L'shana acheret, the next year, kvaum be'asaum yamim tovim b'halel v'hoda'ah. They established them as being days of Yom Tov, holidays, that would be celebrated with Halel v'hoda'ah, with the singing of Hallel and Thanksgiving. So here in this Mishnah, how many reasons for Hanukkah do we find? One. Just one. We don't find mention about the defeating of the Greeks. We find the mention, it's an aside. Yes, they defeat the Greeks, but the real reason is the miracle of the lights. Now what's interesting is that this is the first location, this Gemara in Masechet Shabbos is the first location that we find in our recorded tradition of this miracle. And there were earlier opportunities for this miracle to have been discussed. If you look at the notes here, this comes from the Tzasino Talmud, that edition, they have a nice little note that talks about when this took place. And it refers us to 2 sources in the book of Maccabees. The book of Maccabees is something that Jews wrote soon after the story of Hanukkah, but it's not part of our Tanakh, because our Tanakh closes with the end of prophecy. When the prophetic era ended, we sealed and closed our book. And anything afterwards is called Svarim Chitzonim. It's considered to be external books to our tradition. And so the book of Maccabees was first written by Jews and preserved by Jews, but at a certain point, the Jews did not keep it. Rather, it was actually the Christians who preserved this book, this Svarim Chitzonim, these external books. So the book is a Jewish book, but it was preserved in Greek by the Christians. It's a great irony if you think about it, that it's a book which celebrates our victory over the Greeks, and it was preserved in Greek by Christians. It's a great irony. But nevertheless, it's a true book, but it's not part of our Tanakh. So I want you to look at source number 2, there are a number of books of Maccabees, because there were many different versions of the story that were which were held. And so they often tell the same story over again with different details. So let's look at source number 2. It happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners, the purification of the sanctuary took place. That is, on the 25th day of the same month, which was Kislev. So here we see a intentional closing of the circuit. That the Greeks had defiled the Beis HaMikdash on the 25th of Kislev. Now, why the Greeks did that is something to think about. Why would the Greeks have chosen the 25th of Kislev to be the day to defile the temple? Any thoughts? What happens around the 25th of Kislev? If you are... What was that? Christmas takes place around that time. Now, of course, Christmas is a Christian holiday. Christians come after... Well, the Christians come after these Greeks. Jesus lived probably not really around the year 0, probably a little bit before or after, probably a little bit whatever it was. Whenever he lived, it's at least 150 years after the times of the Hashmonaim. And so it's not the 25th of December, and the 25th of Kislev, though, do respond to a certain pagan time to have a holiday. Think about the calendar. Think about what's that? The shortest day of the year. Exactly, is around that time. Now, if you're a good pagan, why would you want to have a holiday just around the shortest time of the year? Because during the shortest time of the year, that's when things are at their darkest. That's when you would have the greatest sense of depression, a sense of foreboding. The power of darkness seems most strong. And then, as the days start to get a little bit longer and you get to appreciate that, all of a sudden the powers of light begin to come back in and bring back the goodness, bring back the seasons of warmth, bring back the fertility that the earth will once again bring forth its great opportunity. So if you're a Greek pagan, you're going to want to have a holiday specifically during the period of darkness where light begins to once again come forth. So Judah Maccabee says we're going to have a Jewish holiday on the same time that the Greeks defiled our Beis HaMikdash. So there is a correlation between Hanukkah and pagan holidays. Not because chas v'shalom we would want to be like the pagans, but because the pagans had their holiday and defiled our Beis HaMikdash on that day, and we're going to show them. We're going to pick the exact same day that the pagans had their defilement of our Beis HaMikdash, and we're going to give them a Kaddish on that day. So it turns out that Hanukkah ends up being the same time, but to show it them, to push them back for what they did to us. The story continues. They celebrated it for 8 days with rejoicing, in the manner of the festival of booths. What's that called? In good English, it's called Sukkot. So, we celebrate Hanukkah, according to the book of Maccabees, for 8 days because of lights, because of Sukkot. Because Sukkot was for 8 days, so we want this holiday to also be for 8 days. Now, I want you to think about the question as we read through the source. Why of all holidays should you try to recreate Sukkot? What's so special about Sukkot? About Pesach? About Shavuos? Lots of holidays you could have made Hanukkah to be like. Why Sukkot? Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. Remembering how not long before, during the Festival of Booths, they had been wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals. Therefore, carrying ivy-wreathed wands and beautiful branches, and also fronds of palm, they offered hymns of thanksgiving to him who had given success to the purifying of his own holy place. They decreed by public edict, ratified by vote, that the whole nation of the Jews should observe these days every year. Okay? So what's the explanation for why Sukkot?
shows the protection of Hashem.
Protection of Hashem is reflected in Sukkot. Certainly it's true. He talks about how God had watched over them while they were like beasts in the mountains, fighting to survive, and they've succeeded and re-entered the Beit Midrash and been able to rededicate it as God would have intended. But it's also important to remember the special importance of Sukkot, that they had not celebrated Sukkot that year. And Sukkot was the holiday. As in our rabbis refer to Sukkot as being, what's the word in the Talmud for Sukkot? Chag. The Chag is Sukkot. And what's more, if you look at Tanakh, and you look at Yeravam, which holiday did Yeravam recreate a month later in order to pull Jews away from going to Jerusalem? Sukkot. He created a holiday not in the 7th month, but in the 8th month, the month of Cheshvan, because every Jew loved Sukkot. And not just Jews. Who else has, quote, a Sukkot? There was a holiday that took place a couple of weeks ago in a country to our south. Thanksgiving. Every culture has a Sukkot, a Thanksgiving. And so that year, they did not have the regular Thanksgiving because they were all fighting. So that we can't miss Sukkot this year. So they said, you know what? We're going to have an 8-day holiday now on the 25th of Kislev. So that's our first source that talks about the celebration. Now, the miracle which takes place here, or what's the reason of the holiday? The victory over the Greeks. That's what they're describing. And it's even more clear in our next source. This is from the first book of Maccabees. Then Judah and his brothers said, this is source number 3, "See, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it." So all the army assembled and went up to Mount Zion. There they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned, and the gates burned. In the courts they saw bushes sprung up as in a thicket, or as on one of the mountains. They saw also the chambers of the priests in ruins. Then they tore their clothes and mourned with great lamentation. They sprinkled themselves with ashes and fell face down on the ground. When the signal was given with the trumpets, they cried out to heaven. Then Judah detailed men to fight against those in the citadel until he had cleansed the sanctuary. He chose blameless priests devoted to the law, and they cleansed the sanctuary and removed the defiled stones to an unclean place. They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offering, which had been profaned. So they see in the Beit Midrash, they see that there's an altar. And the altar was used by the Greeks for their avodah zarah. And they didn't know what to do. And they thought it best to tear it down so that it would not be a lasting shame to them. The Gentiles had defiled it. But they took it apart. What are they supposed to do with the stones? They don't know. So they tore down the altar and stored the stones in a convenient place on the temple hill until a prophet should come to tell them what to do with them. So it's amazing. It's like they're waiting for Eliyahu Navi to come and tell them what to do. They don't have a prophet. As he said, the prophetic era is over. But they're hoping a prophet will come to tell them what to do. Then they took unhewn stones, as the law directs, and built a new altar, like the old one. They also rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple, and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels, and brought the lampstands, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. Then they offered incense on the altar, and lit the lamps on the lampstands. And these gave light in the temple. So you have a description here about relighting the lights in the Beit HaMikdash. This would be a reference in some respects to the menorah or the multiple menorahs that were present to bring light inside the Beit HaMikdash. There it is, right? They lit lamps on the lampstands, and they gave light in the temple. They placed the bread on the table and hung up the curtains. Thus they finished all the work they had undertaken. Early in the morning, on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose and offered sacrifice as the law directs, on the new altar of burnt offering that they had built. at the very season and on the very day that the Gentiles had profaned it. Once again, the same idea. It was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and worshipped and blessed heaven, who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered a sacrifice of well-being and a thanksgiving offering. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers for the priests and fitted them with doors. There was very great joy among the people, and the disgrace brought by the Gentiles was removed. Then Judah and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days, beginning on the 25th day of the month of Kislev. So here you don't have the mention of Sukkot. You have once again an 8-day holiday, but you have a great detail about all the things that the Jews were doing to re-engage their faith and to rededicate and to cleanse the Beit HaMikdash. What don't you find here? And shockingly so. What's not in this story? You have so many details. What's missing? The miracle of the oil. Nowhere to be found. And so to get back to our question, it's now redoubled. Not only is Hanukkah unique in that it's a holiday with 2 different reasons, but it's a holiday in which the sources for those events do not have both reasons. One source, the Talmud, has the reason of the miracle of the lights, and one source, the book of Maccabees, does not have that story. Rather, it has the story of the victory of the Jews over the Greeks. So how are we to understand both these reasons? What do they come to tell us? What is the meaning? Would not one miracle have sufficed, or would not one reason have sufficed? And why is it that only one source has a miracle of the lights, whereas the other source does not? So I want to take a couple of moments with you to ask and to think about how it is that you rededicate a temple. How do you build a Beit HaMikdash? What are the crucial ingredients in building a shul, in creating a sanctuary? So, I'm not sure how many of you had the chance to be at a shul dedication. Any of you have been at a shul dedication ever? When a shul first comes into being, what do you do when you start a shul? Had a chance to be there? So what do you do? Shaarei Tefillah. Okay, tell me, what did you do at Shaarei Tefillah? How many years ago was Shaarei Tefillah dedicated?
50 odd years ago.
Okay, 50 odd years ago. So what happened on that day of dedication? What did you do?
On the day they said special davening. It was a very festive occasion.
You threw up a nice party, right? There was special davening too. And the Torahs brought into the Beit Shul. And there was dancing with the Torahs as they came in. Absolutely. So that is what we would do when we bring in and start a new shul. And when you start a Beit HaMikdash, it's not that much different. So I want to look at a number of sources from Tanakh now to see the ingredients of the dedication of a Beit HaMikdash, or for that matter, a Mishkan. The first is a source from the Torah, and this is the second. This is from the very end of Sefer Shmot, in which we read about Moshe's building the Mishkan. Vayakem et hachatzer saviv lamishkan v'lamizbeach. And Moshe reared up the court around the tabernacle and around the altar. Vayitenes masach shar hachatzer. And he set up the screen at the gate of the court. Vayichal Moshe tamalacha. And Moshe finished the work. Vayichas ha'anan et ohel moed, and the cloud covered the tent of meeting. Uchvod Hashem malei et hamishkan, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle. V'lo yachol Moshe lavo el ohel moed, ki shachan alav ha'anan, uchvod Hashem malei et hamishkan. And Moshe was not able to enter into the tent of meeting because the cloud abode thereon. The cloud was present there. God's presence was there. Moshe could not enter. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So if you're a Jew watching this moment, as the Mishkan is being completed, and you see Moshe unable to enter because a cloud has descended from heaven and become present upon that Mishkan, what do you immediately realize?
God is there. God is sanctioning all of this.
God is with us. God is present in our work. We feel God's help and God's connection through what it is that we have done. And that's emphasized even more so in the next source, in Sefer Vayikra, which also talks about the same moment, but on a more of a ritual level, talking about the process of sacrifices that surrounded that moment. Source number 5. Vayavo Moshe v'Aaron Eloha Moed. And Moshe and Aaron entered into the tent of meeting. Vayetzu, and they then went out. Vayivarchu es ha'am, and they blessed the people. Vayira kavod Hashem el kol ha'am, and God's honor was revealed before all the people. Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem, a fire came out from before God. Vatochal ala mizbeach, and it consumed the sacrifices upon the altar. Et ha'olav et ha'chalavim, the burnt offering and the fats. Vayar kol ha'am vayaronu, and all the people saw it and they shouted out. Vayiplu al pneihem, and they fell upon their faces. Now that's a shocking moment, and you see, and the Torah tells us how the Jews responded. It was a wow moment. It was something great. And at that time, we're able to appreciate the appearance of God and the connection of God to our people at that time. And it's actually interesting to think about our own tefillot that we say today when we daven on Motzei Shabbos. And we speak about our own desire that we should see God's involvement in our own work. Vayihi noam Hashem Elokeinu aleinu, u'maaseh yadeinu konena aleinu, u'maaseh yadeinu konenehu. May the pleasantness of my Lord, our God, be upon us. May He establish our handiwork for us. Our handiwork may He establish. And so we pray that God help us achieve with our work that which He wills. And that's what the Jews felt at that time when they saw the Beit HaMikdash becoming the place of God's presence. Now, it wasn't just in times of the Mishkan. But if we look at the Beit HaMikdash as well, we see a similar thing. Look at source number 6. Vayihi b'tzeit HaKohanim min HaKodesh. And it was when the Kohanim left the holy place. Ve'anan malei et Beit Hashem. And the cloud filled up the house of God. V'lo yachlu HaKohanim la'amor l'sheres b'nei anan. And the Kohanim could not enter because the cloud of God's presence was there. Ki malei kavod Hashem et Beit Hashem. Because God's holiness, God's honor filled up that space. Az amar Shlomo, at that moment Shlomo says, Hashem amar lishkon ba'arafel, ba'no baniti beis zvulach, machon l'shitecha olamim. The Lord has said that God, He would dwell in the thick darkness, and yet I have surely built for you a house of habitation, a place for you to dwell in forever. There's an appreciation of God's connection to that place. That's what we seek when we dedicate a shul, when we dedicate a Beit HaMikdash. We want God to be present. But now, if you look at the last source number 7, you'll see a problem. This is a source from the book of Ezra, which is not talking about the first Beit HaMikdash, but the second Beit HaMikdash. And what you'll see here is a moment of confusion. A moment when the Jews have built the second Beit HaMikdash, they've established the foundation for the second Beit HaMikdash. And everyone is celebrating the holiday. It happens to be, in this case, the holiday of Sukkot. And what's going to happen is that the people are not going to be so sure about whether God is really there or not. Let's read the source. And when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, Vayamidu HaKohanim milubashim b'chatzotzrot v'aludim b'nei Asaf b'mitziltayim le'alel et Hashem al yedei David melech Yisrael. And they set the priests in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals to praise the Lord, according to the direction of David, king of Israel. Vayanu b'halel v'hodot l'Hashem. And they sang one to another in praising and giving thanks to the Lord. Ki tov, ki li'olam chasdo. Because the God is good, and His mercy endures forever. Al Yisrael, for Israel. By the way, does that sound familiar? They're saying Hallel. It's the same Hallel that we say. It's taken from Tehillim. They're quoting Tehillim to say Hallel the same way we do. And all the people pull out their shofars, and they blow their shofars at the same time out of Hallel. So we see that one of the uses of shofar was as a means of Hallel. It's interesting to think about this source when we consider the fact that we don't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah. Because in some respects, the shofar serves as a form of Hallel. Ad al Husad Beis Hashem. Because the sanctuary of God had its foundation. It was now founded. And it was that there were some priests, and there were Levites, and the heads of the households who were elderly, who had remembered the first Beis HaMikdash. And when they saw this house, this Beis HaMikdash, B'Einehem, Bochim B'Kol Gadol, they cried out of sadness, because this Beis HaMikdash was a nebach. It was a nothing compared to the first Beis HaMikdash. V'rabim b'tshruah b'simcha larim kol. And there were others who tried to shout them down with joy at this moment. Ve'ein ha'am makirim kol tshruah ha'simcha l'kol b'chi ha'am. And the people could not distinguish the sound of the shofar of joy from the sound of crying of the people. Ki ma'am miri'im tshruah gadolah v'kol nishmad l'mrachok. Because the people were shouting with a loud shout, and the noise was heard from far off. What's missing here in this story, in the second Beis HaMikdash? The cloud of glory, the fire from heaven that descends. It's missing. It's missing. And so the second Beis HaMikdash becomes a period of wonder, in which the Jewish people are waiting for the cloud of God to descend upon them to show that He cares, that He's involved, that their work has meaning. And they try, they sing, they make through great efforts to appreciate and to give thanksgiving to God, because they are back in Jerusalem. They are rebuilding the second Commonwealth. But they don't see the cloud. They don't have that feeling. And so, if we look at the Navi Zechariah and the Haftorah that we'll read this Shabbos, we'll see that anticipation, that seeking God's presence in the moment in which God seems quite hidden. And I believe that the Gemara Mesechus Shabbos is coming to give us that answer, to tell us where in that time period the Jews were able to see the cloud of God. And the cloud of God was appreciated in the miracle of the lights. That the fact that those candles lasted for 8 days, when they should have only lasted for one, was a signal that even though there's no big cloud, even though there's no fire from heaven that comes down, but that God is still with us in this moment of our history. That the victory over the Greeks was not simply a political victory, but it was also a signal of God's love and God's presence in His Beis HaMikdash. And so for the book of Maccabees, the concern is really one of politics. It's one of victory over the Greeks. And that's a cause of its own to celebrate. But for the rabbis in the Talmud, that cannot suffice. Because to have a Beis HaMikdash without the Anan is not to have a Beis HaMikdash. What is our actions, as we read in the prayer by Noam, if God is not a part of them? And so the rabbis give us an insight into the quiet, Because how many people witnessed the miracle inside the Kodesh? How many people saw those lights last for 8 nights? Only the Kohanim. And even that, maybe just a couple. Not many Kohanim saw it. But yet we appreciate that miracle and what it means. Because it's not just a miracle. It's not just happenstance that the lights last for 8 days and we have a big party. It means something. It means that God is with us in a period without prophecy, where we don't know what to do with the stones in the Beit Midrash that we've removed and rebuilt. But we're still able to feel God's hand on our shoulders. We're still able to feel God's holiness. And I believe that there's a reason that Hanukkah is the holiday of the Jews in North America. And it's not just the fact that it happens to correlate with another holiday that also correlates with the Greek holiday, which would they defile the Beit HaMikdash. And that is that we too live in an era where it's hard to feel God's presence, where there's no cloud that descends upon our shuls, and that the magnetic force of God's presence is only felt by very strong magnets. And as a result, we have to sense and appreciate God's love and the ability to see within a nace that is so subtle a message about something far broader, that our Jewish history matters, that our sovereignty matters, that our ability to pass on the Torah matters, because God is with us even in periods of darkness. And I think that's one of the key messages of Hanukkah, and that's why it has to have 2 reasons for this holiday. It's not just to have a political victory. We need a spiritual sign of God's presence, and that's also why the rabbis in the Gemara, Masechet Shabbos, had to emphasize this miracle of the lights. The miracle of the politics is also true, it's also important, but the miracle of the lights is what holds us through our history, holds us through our darkness, and gives us the courage to pass on the Torah to our children. Okay, any questions? Yes?
If there's no mention of the miracle in the book of Maccabees, and then the first mention we have is 500 years later, and it was only the Kohanim who saw the miracle, so how did that get passed down?
An oral tradition. It was passed on as an oral tradition that this was something that took place at that time.
So why wasn't it mentioned in the book of Maccabees? I know I hear you saying they were emphasizing the political, but they were also thanking God for the miracle of the political win. But why wasn't it mentioned there?
The book of Maccabees is not concerned about the spiritual side of that moment. As for them, they are concerned about the politics, the victory over the Greeks. That's the focus. And so when they beat the Greeks, that's a cause for re-engaging the holiday of Sukkot. That's the focus. Whereas for the rabbis of the Talmud, the focus is on the spiritual meaning of that time. So the Maccabeim, or the people who wrote the book of Maccabees, they very well might have been aware of that other miracle, but that's not central for them. What's central for them is the victory, and that's what they talk about. Whereas for the rabbis of the Talmud, the focus is the miracle of the lights. Yes?
Who was supposed to have written the book of Maccabees? Were they Jews? Or were
So there were Jews who wrote it, and it was not preserved by the Jews, though, through history. It was the Christians who preserved it. It's called the Sfarim HaChitzonim. It's one of our external books, because we close our Tanakh with the end of prophecy. And the book of Maccabees is not a prophetic book. The authors themselves will tell you it's a book of history. It's not a book of prophetically inspired writing.
Are there a lot of different versions? Like, in other words,
that's why there are multiple books. Exactly. You might notice that in source number 2 it's the second book of Maccabees, whereas in source number 3 it's the first book of Maccabees, because there were multiple versions of the story. Okay, so I have to close here. Wishing everyone a Chanukah Sameach, and again a bracha to you, that may your Hanukkah be filled both with an appreciation for the physical, the victory of the Jews over the Greeks, but also experiencing God's holiness and God's presence in your shuls and in your homes, as you're able to see that the miracle is continued to be mifursam, is continued to be spread in our days by our actions. Shukach.
Is Rabbi Chaim Strauchler. He is the Rav at Shaarei Shomayim congregation in Toronto. He received his rabbinic ordination from the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary at Yeshiva University. Before joining Shaarei Shomayim in 2008, Rabbi Strauchler was the rabbi at Beit Chaverim Synagogue in Westport and was at the Riverdale, New York Jewish Center before that. In university, Rabbi Strauchler was a pre-med science student before switching to English for literature and rabbinical studies. He earned a diploma in theology and a master's in religious studies from Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. He also holds a Wexner Graduate Fellowship, a master's degree in biblical studies from the Bernard Revel Graduate School, and is a Wexner Graduate Fellowship alumnus. He publishes scholarly articles on the Bible and the Talmud, in addition to publishing his own poetry.